we've got a very special feeder fishing bite size for you. We've come all the way over to Ireland to show you the ins and outs of feeder fishing tactics on a big loch like this. The most important thing when feeder fishing on Ireland is location. These lochs are huge. The fish could be absolutely anywhere. So a bit of research before you get here and local knowledge is vital. The people out here are so friendly and they know these lochs inside out. Different times of the year, different conditions, they know it all. They can even tell you how far to fish and what you're likely to catch. So it's definitely worth spending that time gathering all that information so you can maximise your time on the bank. The depth of water you're fishing out here can be absolutely crucial. Different fish feed at different levels, so have a good plumb around in your swim, check those different depths you've been recommended, find those areas, get a good picture of the bottom, check there's no snags in front of you that are going to interfere with your day's fishing. It's really, really important you do this before you even put any bait in. A typical session for me in Ireland would be fishing two lines really. I usually fish longer in the deeper water for the bigger fish. Everyone loves catching bigger fish, so I'll be targeting hybrids, bream, maybe some skimmers and an odd big perch long. And then I'll have a line which I like to call the resting line, which will be shorter, a bit of a busier line where I'll not put so much bait in, be in slightly shallower water to target some smaller species like roach. To maximise my chances on both the chosen lines I've done, yesterday when we arrived we did a bit of pre-baiting. We plumbed up, found our spots, put some bait in. The fish could be miles away in this loch and may not have been someone fishing here for quite a few weeks, so we've put some bait in to try and bring the fish into the area, and today I'll top that up before I start the session. The long line, I've put a big mixture of chopped worms, casters, even some corn. The hybrids love corn here, so that's quite an important part of my bait. We've got a nice cereal mix which is full of hemp, full of biscuit, full of flavour. And then on the shorter line, what I've done is I've put lots of casters through and some ground bait as well, and hopefully that will bring the roach in. Not as much pre-bait in there. The roach generally come in quite quickly and feed, so you don't have to do so much pre-baiting on that line. Bait, mega important on venues like this. You've got to get it right to maximise your catch. So to start with, the main ingredient, which is going to be your ground bait, this is the bulk of everything, is really important. Over here in Ireland, fish meal isn't very popular, doesn't seem to work. I think it's because these fish are used to natural baits. So lovely cereal mix. This is a new one for Mainline Match. It's going to be called Proactive. It's a really rich cereal mix. It's got lots of particles in, lots of biscuit, lots of crumb, and it's just darkened off. It's a really nice dark colour, really powerful smell as well. That is a great base mix. One thing about Ireland, I always like to use a slightly darker ground bait because as you can see the water is tap clear, it's really clear, and I feel like the fish feel a little bit safer feeding over a darker area. So that's your main ingredient, whether you're putting it through a window feeder or a cage feeder. It's very, very active, got lots of food in it. But the trick is what you're putting through it as the session goes on. So for today's session, I've literally just run out of that, so I'm going to top it up and put in a mixture of worms, casters and maggots. And what I do is I have a separate tub and I'll mix them all together in here, just in small amounts, so I can change that as the session's going on. But these are nice, not finely cut worms, there's still plenty of meat on them. nice dendrobinas, and what I do is, just for example, there's your worms there, nice bit of chop. I'll add a handful of casters, got a good variety going down there, a few maggots, especially if you're fishing maggots on the hook, it's always good to put a few in, and then where there's a chance of a few big bream, they love a bit of corn. So there we go, that's the sort of mix I'd use, and what I do is I'll put this bit in the feeder first. Depending on how well the fish are feeding, I will change the amount I'm putting in each time. So I'll put a bit of that in, top either side off with ground bait, and that's how I start the session. And I'll build this up or back off if I'm catching or if I'm not catching. Moving on to hook baits, so simple. You put in worms, you put in maggots, you put in casters, you put in corn through the feeder. They're all great hook baits on their own and as a cocktail as well. Whole worm and a maggot, brilliant bait. 2 halves of worm and a maggot, excellent bait. Bunch of casters and maggots, really good. Small fish, they love a worm head, great bait for a small fish, or even just a single maggot on a big hook so you don't miss a bite. Always worth trying. Another one not to come to Ireland without is red worms. They're probably my go-to bait to get a bite late on in sessions. When it's all drying up, put a couple of red worms on, all fish love them. And last hook bait, piece of corn. I love putting a piece of corn on very late in sessions. When you've been feeding it all day, you tend to find the bigger fish will pick that out. So put a bit of corn on, last jerk, you never know, you might catch a bream. One thing that is guaranteed when you're fishing in Ireland is the weather conditions will 100% change, probably 5 or 6 times during one session. So it's really important to be nice and stable, get your box set up correctly, have your bait brolly, have all the important stuff so everything's protected and to hand, so if those conditions do change, you can carry on battling through it. Ireland isn't letting us down. The session started off really well. Look at that. An angry young William. Nice perch. When we got here this morning, we put a bit of bait in because we knew we had a little while before we could start fishing. So pre-baited a little bit. There you go, look at that perch. Let's put him in the net quick. So we pre-baited with the bait up feeder. We've probably put 10 feederfuls in with lots of worm, few casters, few maggots and a few bits of corn to concentrate the pre-baiting from the night before to hopefully get some fish into the area. And what I've done is I've started on that long line today, nice long hook length, so if there's anything in the area hopefully we'll find them. And I've started with a medium winder feeder. It's got quite a heavy weight on it, it's got 50 gram, but that's purely to cope with the conditions and the depth of the water. It's probably 15-16 foot deep out there, so I want the feeder to get to the bottom quite quickly, and by using a winder feeder you can concentrate the bait as well. So I've literally been filling this with chopped worm, little bit of caster, a few dead maggots and an odd grain of corn. A few locals told us that corn's a great hook bait late on in the session for the bigger fish. So we've been doing that. My first chuck's always with red maggots, so I've had 3 red maggots on and we've literally caught a fish from there on. Started off on 3 red maggots, caught a skimmer, caught a perch, so I put a worm on, piece of worm to start with, chucked out again, caught a slightly bigger skimmer, then I put a decent amount of worm on, hooked with a maggot, and we've had a nice run of hybrids and had odd other fish in between, including roach and those nice perch. So the session's going really well. Moving forward, it's a big old lake. I'm feeling they want a little bit more bait. So what I'm going to do is step up to the larger window feeder, put even more worms through, and I'm probably going to shorten my hook length and try and concentrate the fish around my feeder, see if we can pick up any better ones. The fishing conditions out here can be quite extreme, so it's really important your hardware's up for the job, but your gear's nice and balanced. So 2 lines today, 2 different rods. On my short line, I've gone for the 11-foot Ventus feeder rod. This is a 2-piece rod, perfect for this sort of style of fishing. It's got a nice soft action, but it's got a lot of backbone for chucking them feeders a distance. We're only fishing a short distance today of about 28 metres, so the rod's going to be hopefully nice and busy, catching plenty of roach. Reel wise, I've got a 4,000 reel, and that's loaded with braid. That's 010 pulsate braid. As you can see, it's well used, probably 4 or 5 years old, that braid on there, but the older the better in my eyes. That will work really well. And then I've got a really short shock leader, so I've got 1 turn on the reel. Because we're fishing close, I don't want lots of mono. I want to take the advantage of using the braid to the maximum. So I've got an 8-pound shield shock leader, and that's just coming down to a standard Sips wool running rig. It's what I like to use for most of my feeder fishing. And then I've got a twisted loop there that just doubles it up and kicks the hook length away from the feeder when you're fishing, to save tangles or save any inconvenience while you're hopefully bagging up on roach. My hook length, again, probably a little bit heavier than you would think that you'd need for roach, but as I say, there's lots of rocks out there, there's snags, and you're busy. You get a small window of opportunity in Ireland, and you need to make the most of it when you're on the fish. So I've got 017 engage there, and that's down to a 14 hook, yes, a 14 hook, and that's a feeder special, and that's in a 14. It's got a micro barb on, perfect for casters, worms, or a couple of maggots. As I mentioned, 11-foot rod. One thing I didn't mention was the quiver tip. For today's session, I've got a 1-ounce glass tip in. When fishing braid and stuff, I like it to tighten up for fishing for roach. Those bites are usually instant, so I've got to be direct to my feeder, so a nice light tip will not move the feeder, so I can tighten right up against it and hopefully see every single bite I get. So that's the 11-foot. That's nice balanced gear. Might seem a bit overgunned for smaller fish like roach, but you need it in these horrendous conditions. Moving on to the long line. This is at about 50 metres today, which isn't a million miles out, but it's really important in Ireland not to go too far. As I keep mentioning, the conditions can change very quickly and you can find yourself not being able to get to your spot. So everything for this line is going to be really overgunned. So I've gone for the 12-foot Ventus distance feeder. Again, this is a 2-piece rod. I've gone for a slightly heavier tip on this one. I'll be fishing for braid again, but I'm going to be waiting for bites, so I've got the 2-ounce carbon tip in. This will give me a lot more support if it gets a bit choppy and helps me push the feeder out there a lot easier. As you can see from the reel, it's not a little one, it's not one for the light-hearted. I've gone for a big Castism style reel, and this is purely because if I need to go that extra distance, I've got it in the bag with this reel. It's loaded with 010 pulse braid again, which is my go-to braid for this style of fishing. And then again, I've got the 8-pound shield shock leader. That shock leader just gives me a little bit of extra support on the cast, but also is nice and durable if it's getting mixed in with any rocks or any debris on the bottom. Coming down to the feeder itself, again, we've got a running rig, and that's fixed with, I've got the size 2 link there, which is about 2.5 inches. That just separates the feeder away from the main line and also gives me a little bit of support when casting. I've also got this on my shorter rod, but I've gone for the 1.5 inch, which is a little bit shorter, a little bit tighter, so you can see those bites a bit quicker. Again, at the moment, I've got a window feeder on there, but that's on a snap link and swivel on the end of the link, so I can change that quite quickly. Down to a little stop bead, and that's to my twisted loop, which I use on all my feeder setups. And then on this one, we've really gone strong. We're on 016 fluorocarbon, and that's down to a size 10 feeder special hook. Size 10, I'm going to be fishing bigger baits on this line, and I'm a lot further out, so I want to make sure if I get a bite, I'm going to connect with it. So there you go. Really overgunned gear, but very balanced, very positive, and this should deal with anything Ireland's going to throw at us. On both setups, I mentioned I'm using feeder links today. This is a really simple but effective product. It's basically a small link which separates your feeder away from your main line. It works with a bead system, so there's a bead that runs up and down your main line so the feeder can run smoothly, and then there's a small link to keep a nice divide between your main line and your feeder. The main purposes for this are 1, to avoid tangles, 2, help you cast more effectively, and also bite indication is more clearer because of the separation. The fish isn't picking up the feeder straight away, so you get a better bite indication on your tip. There's 3 different sizes in these. For the short line, I'm using the short link, and for the long line, I'm using the longer link. Dead simple, dead effective. Couple of hours into the session now. I said I was going to be more positive on that long line. It started off really well. We caught a mixture of skimmers, hybrids, some roach, some perch. It was all going well, and I thought, right, I'm going to concentrate some more bait through, put lots of worms through, shorten my hook length up to try and increase it and try and catch some better stamp fish. It actually worked in the reverse. The bite slowed down and I started catching perch, which was a good sign to me that I was putting too much bait in. So I've picked up my shorter rod. I'm going to leave that now for a little while. I'm going to have a bit of fun on the shorter rod, hopefully to get some bites and to put some fish in the net. So what I've done, I'm just fish a smaller hook bait, start off on a maggot, maybe a little worm head. I'm going to put some casters and a little bit of worm through the tiny window feeder and just try and get some bites. And what I'll do is I'll rest that long line and hopefully go back to it in a 20 minutes, half hour, and we'll hopefully get some bigger fish. When fishing in Ireland, I like a nice selection of feeders. As you can see by the conditions and the venues, so many changes can happen. You've got to be prepared for them. Starting off with baiting up, I've got two main baiting up feeders. These are both cage style feeders. I much prefer this. I think when you're trying to set off or start a swim, you want to let the fish know you're there, and it could be 12 or 15 foot deep, but the fish could be 3 or 4 foot deep. So you want to let them know you're there. With a cage, bits of bait will come off at all levels, and then the main concentration of bait will come out on the bottom. So these are great to start a session. Got these in medium and large, and there's a few different weights as well, from 20 to 50 gram. So sometimes a heavy weight will work better to get the bait down a little bit quicker. A nice lighter weight if you want to open it on the surface, or you've got a nice short chuck. Another feeder I like to use for baiting up a lot, these are brand new. These are the bait up window feeders. These come in 40 and 50 gram. These are great for long distance fishing. This bullet nose shape will absolutely cast a mile. And the nice thing about these, you can put so much particle in. So chopped worm, maggots, casters, corn, you can fully load it in here with very little ground bait. So if there's plenty of fish in the swim, these are my choice. Then for fishing itself, all depends, different feeders good on different days, different conditions, but my main attack is I'll always start off with a cage feeder. These are the exchange cage feeders. These go from 5 hole down to 2 hole, and they go in a range of weights from 20 to 70 grams, so that will pretty much cover everything. The nice thing about a cage, similar to baiting up, they let the fish know you're there, the scent, the food and everything can come out through the channels of the water, as well as concentrating a bit on the bottom. So they're a great starting point. If conditions and fishing's a little bit harder, there's always the solid version as well. This just concentrates the bait a little bit more on the bottom. Less bait will come out through the water, so if you need to catch those fish and those few bites on the deck, that's the feeder of choice. Then to probably the most popular feeder in Ireland is the window feeder. As you can see here, got a nice selection of all different sizes, from small to large, and there's like the exchange feeder, there's a nice display of weights, so you can go from anything from 20 to 60 gram in all different sizes. The nice thing about a window feeder is they just cast like a dream. Any conditions, and as I keep mentioning, the conditions can catch you out here a lot of times. These will cast into anything, and the nice thing about it is you can control your bait as well. You can have a lot of particle in there or very little, and just top the window off with ground bait. Real versatile way of fishing. You can plow it in, put it in nice and tight. If you don't want to feed much, you can put it in nice and loose, and this will do most of the work for you. So these are brilliant. They help with presentation, go in like a dream. There we go. Window feeders, cage feeders, solid feeders, and your bait ups. Pretty much everything you need. Well, that's been fun on the short line. A few smaller fish to start with, caught a few perch and a skimmer, and then just made a little change, got a hybrid on the short line. Really good fun on the light gear. It's a cracking fish, that one. Let me get him in the net and I'll tell you exactly what I've done. So it all started off nice and easily, chucking in perch, skimmer, went really well, and then I started missing loads of bites. And that's quite typical of Ireland. You have to change your feeding or something to start getting them bites again. So in my head, it was let them see the bait for a little bit longer, let it fall more naturally. So I put a longer tail on. I went from sort of like a 60 centimetre tail all the way to a 1 metre. Still with the same hook bait, 2 red maggots, that's been best. Chucked it out, feeders hit the bottom, tightened up on the rest. A couple of minutes later, tip's gone round. No knocks, no signs, just a proper bite, fish on. Job done. Well, after catching that hybrid, I've got to have a few more chucks on that short line. The longer tail seems to be doing the trick, but in the back of my head, I still think those better fish and the chance of a bream are going to be on that longer line. So I think I'll finish on some bigger baits on that long line and hopefully I can get a specimen in the net. Well, the short line didn't catch me any more hybrids and I was desperate to get back on that long line. We've persevered all day, putting bait in on there, building it up, and I just knew with the late on in the session like it is now, there was definitely some better fish to have. And there we go, first chuck, nothing. Second chuck, we're back into a nice, I think it's a hybrid, yeah, another nice hybrid. Again, put a bigger hook bait on that time. I wasn't confident enough to put the corn on yet, but nice big worm hook bait. Look at that, Irish hybrid. Well worth travelling all those miles for. Well, it's getting late on in the session now. It's been a fantastic day, typical Ireland. You've had to adapt all day long to keep the bites coming, but the conditions have changed, the weather's changed, the sun's been out, it's rained, it's done everything, but that's Ireland for you. Massive thank you to Lakelands Fishing Club for allowing us to film and fish here. They're very lucky to have this on their doorstep. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. For me, it's been a very typical day of Irish fishing. The short lines caught you some fish when you needed to rest the long line, but as normal in Ireland, that long line, that right depth of water, those changes throughout the day will bring you the better fish. Got a big piece of corn on now, big window feeder. Fingers crossed that tip's going to go around one more time and hopefully we'll catch a bream.